Hey, this is Daniel,
And I'm Ruth. Hello.
Israel Uncovered, and today we're going to talk about the BBC. We're both former employees at the British Broadcasting Corporation,
We are.
also known as the British Brotherhood Corporation these days.
Yeah. Wow. That was, what a week they have had.
Yeah, they deserve it.
They do.
So dumb. I mean, I keep saying this thing on my social network. It's such a damn hill to die on.
Yeah.
It's just so silly. Again, it's like taking news source from Hamas, taking Hamas as a legitimate piece of news source is just like taking, North Korea, or taking the Kremlin, or taking Iran.
Yeah.
Like you're taking this
Terrorists.
Yeah, whatever. Call it terrorist, call it like authoritarian, totalitarian dictatorship, completely hermetic society that controls every piece of information that goes out there, and take what they say as fact, is a recipe for disaster.
So let's say about the documentary.
Yep.
So a documentary was aired on BBC last week, and basically it was filled. It was Hamas propaganda, but it was narrated by the son of a Hamas minister. I can't even call it minister. I mean, just...
Well, it is the government of Gaza, so it's a Hamas minister.
Hamas minister. And then they did all sorts of things like change the translation. They didn't use the correct translation.
Right. So, for example, the kid would say something like, "Yeah, they were fighting. They were just waging jihad on the Jews," and they translated to like they were fighting the occupying Israeli forces, and everyone listening to it was like, how did it get to that translation?
Yeah.
So again, a lot of that stuff. Then also like the cameraman, then like he was on his social network celebrating October 7th. So basically, and it's really interesting because all of this, again, we've both worked at the BBC for years, and we know that when there is something on a subject that is so contentious and that is going to provoke such controversy, the amount of lawyers, producers, commissioners, fact checkers, the amount of people that have seen that and that have researched and the due diligence on it is insane. So my question is always, how? I mean,
how did it get on air?
How did it get on air after going through all those loops? And also, how did one person in 1 hour after watching three hours after watching the documentary
basically
dismantle the whole thing?
Dismantled the whole thing.
Like how? So, and that's why I say like it's such a dumb hill to die on, because like if you give an intern like an afternoon to do some background checks, by the way, just on the social media of the contributors, you don't need to go into like, you don't need to like do the crazy due diligence about like spying on bank accounts or hidden emails.
No.
Just go on the social networks of the people featured in your documentary or your primetime documentary, and you might find that is not very kosher, I guess.
Yeah. So obviously this has been an ongoing problem for a number of years,
right,
decades. But what happened last week has really kind of, it's the straw that broke the camel's back, isn't it?
Well,
and I mean, the campaign for anti-Semitism in the UK, they held a huge rally last Tuesday to basically say stop giving terrorists a megaphone.
Right. Well, I think the important thing to say is that it is the what did you say? The straw that
it is the straw that broke the camel's back.
It is the straw that broke the camel's back. Now I'm sounding very Spanish. I think it's super important for people to know that this documentary, it's the straw that broke the camel's back, because it's linked to BBC funding going directly into Hamas terrorists. And Hamas is a UK prescribed terrorist organization. And when you're a UK prescribed terrorist organization, funding it is illegal. So it's not even an editorial decision whether it's right, wrong, it can be argued, whatever. It's a legal thing that went to Parliament, went to MPs, by the way, both the leader of both main parties, both the Conservatives, and everyone is like kind of like, okay, it's a police matter. And it's a criminal investigation because it's illegal to fund terrorism and also to broadcast and promote terrorism, which is what they ended up doing.
So I just want to stop you there a second, because when the UK government does insist on paying UNRWA 17 million, how is that actually different from the taxpayer, the UK taxpayer, paying the BBC the license fee?
Well, that's
to me that it's actually the same thing.
Yeah, but that's why many people refer as the UN as a front for Hamas.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that kind of like, they what do you call it? Like with the money, they
whitewash it.
When you take money and you make it from illegal to legal. Anyway, so that's when they
launder.
Exactly. That's like the money laundering exercise. That they take money through the UN and ends up in Hamas hands. But in this case, it's direct BBC payment to a Hamas operative. So there's no laundering exercise.
No.
So it's like a very direct, these
payment.
People put money into this. And that's
£400,000.
Which I also think was really weird, because that's the cost of like a primetime drama show. How do you pay that for like a shitty documentary in Gaza? That's why I said like kudos to the producers, because they really flipped a profit on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've paid £500,000 for that hour of like 3 kids in Gaza with like a handicam just saying how hard their lives is, like it's anyway. I think it's crazy the amount of money they paid, the stuff they produce. Again, with the typical narrative of, I think the whole thing is disgusting. I mean, why do you have children and the due diligence, by the way, when you have kids on television, is like, who are the parents? Do they have a signature of the parents approving that they're there? So again,
anything to use a child's image in the UK is so much paperwork involved.
Exactly. So how did it get to that? And also, I think it's a missed opportunity, because I think the BBC should have done an incredible documentary with Gaza voices outside of Gaza that can speak without a gun held to their head.
Yeah.
So I would love to really, really hear and understand the perspective from adults that can hold a real conversation.
Yeah.
And that
which we do have, by the way, in Israeli media here.
Of course.
We always have people in Gaza talking about...
No, out of Gaza normally, because it's usually people out of Gaza. If you're in Gaza and you speak against Hamas, you're a dead person.
So they change the voices, they disguise them.
Yeah.
But there are people talking to Israeli media in Gaza,
of course,
about
their situation.
Yeah. But you won't hear that on the BBC.
Right.
Ever.
But there's also like people in the UK, there's people in Europe that have escaped Gaza.
Yeah.
And that also, and by the way, they can also be like super critical and hate Israel, but they can be also super critical and hate Hamas and the government, but they're able to speak the truth.
Yeah.
And the problem is that any of the kids in this documentary or any adult right now that is interviewing Gaza, they cannot speak truth to power because there's no free speech in Gaza. You're controlled by a terrorist regime, and if you say anything against them, that's why you'll never hear anything from inside Gaza like critiquing the current government.
Yeah.
So that's why it's super interesting. And the other thing I would say is that, okay, so now that the BBC is in deep shit, of course they issue a massive apology and we
sick of the apologies.
Regrettable failure. And we failed, and we understand that the trust of the public, whatever.
There's got to be consequences now.
That's fine, but the consequence stuff. But to me, the biggest mistake has been to focus and isolate the apology around this documentary alone. Because in the past 16 months, they've had to retract 15 major things. They've had to correct 16 things, usually because they've completely misrepresented and completely damaged Israel's image. So. And for that, an apology, again, is not enough. So you cannot just say, we're sorry for this just because there's a criminal investigation around it. You have to put it in the context of dozens of corrections, mistakes, and retractions that have been the direct result of using Hamas, a UK proscribed terrorist organization, as a legitimate source of information to report to the world.
Right. I also want to touch on the fact that Israel has not let media into Gaza.
Okay.
And I would have liked to have seen some journalists go in. Mm-hmm. I also get why Israel has said no, because I think it is just genuinely too dangerous for them to be there. No. And then they don't want more deaths on their hands.
If a journalist dies in Gaza, who's going to get the blame for it? So why would you have that? And then also, if nobody can speak truth to power in Gaza, What would you do? Of course, it would be great if they had people inside. I agree.
I do think Israel could have handled that slightly better and differently, and in a way that maybe because they did take some journalists in. Yeah. Some have been in, and they've been in with the IDF, and I get that.
Yeah, but they're constrained.
They're constrained.
But if you leave someone unconstrained, they're gonna have like a Hamas gun on their head to only report what they say.
Yeah,
they're gonna. No, they're not gonna be kidnapped. Yeah. But they're only gonna be able to. They're only gonna be able to report with a Hamas gun on their head. So everything they're gonna say is the same. All the children are dying. All the women are dying. Israelis keep bombing the occupation. That's gonna be the narrative. And by the way, that's the narrative that the BBC has been broadcasting for 16 months. Everything that comes out of Gaza is not journalism.
No.
Journalism is not allowed in Gaza. So everyone that says like journalists from Gaza, he has a gun to the head. And by the way, like the acid test and the proof of that is that you'll never, ever, ever hear them criticizing the Hamas government for anything. What kind of journalist in any country, in any nation, when there is free speech, never says anything bad about the government?
Yeah.
Everyone criticizes the government.
Yeah.
In every country, in Israel, in England, in America, criticizing your own government is the basis of any journalist anywhere. So to me, it's like, okay, just give me one example in the past 16 months of a journalist from Gaza criticizing the government. Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because they'd be dead. So I think it's really important for people to understand this before they take any information at face value. And to me, the moment the BBC lost the battle, and this is just a consequence from it, by the way, is the moment they decided not to call Hamas terrorists. So,
Which is bizarre.
Well, yeah.
It's bizarre. Like, they are a UK proscribed terrorist group. Every other news broadcaster calls them terrorists.
Right.
Why the BBC have got this, it's just bizarre.
It's weird.
It's like they are being...
Your king calls them terrorists. Your prime minister, whether he's from right or the left, calls them terrorists. By UK law, they are terrorists. And you are so arrogant to say, it's incendiary. Let's not call them terrorists because it makes people feel bad about it. Well, they should feel bad about it because they are terrorists. So, and by the way, and then the consequence of not calling terrorists and making this moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas government leads to a lot of war and death.
Yeah.
And by the way, and it leads to terrible things, both in Israel and in the UK and around the world.
Yeah. So there's a really good independent journalist called Jonathan Sacerdote, and he has written at length.
He's my friend.
And he's Daniel's friend. He's written at length various pieces, and I highly recommend you check them out.
I might Spectator a lot.
I might be able to put the links actually in the description box below when you like and subscribe.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good idea actually, because I think the way he dissects it and the way he
very good.
The way he kind of like frames it, like this needs to be like a moment of reckoning for the BBC, and I just think like it's true that their ideology has taken them so far to the extent that they're making these monumental mistakes and mess ups without even realizing that they're just like too far. And again, I always say it's not just about this conflict. I always say, remember how they reported on Brexit and how out of touch they were with the British public and what people thought and felt.
Yeah, you see, I was living here when Brexit was happening, so I kind of wasn't engaged with
I was following it and I was listening to those news, and in my mind, they didn't have a chance in hell. If you listen to the BBC, there was just like a bunch of far-right racist lunatics and the whole country was against it. So again, they're so out of touch with reality, but also with the Trump-Kamala campaign. Completely out of touch. And I think, and again, so I'm not surprised why people are stopping to watch legacy media. It's not because they don't want to trust them, it's because they can't be trusted.
No, it's because they can't be trusted. But it's such a shame, because we've had a conversation before where we just said, the BBC.
I love the BBC.
Produces amazing
it's
stuff.
The best. I mean, again,
amazing cultural stuff. Some of the best documentaries.
I mean, that one. I worked in natural history, which is like incredible. the Natural History Unit with the David Attenboroughs of the world, and that was like a dream come true.
The David Attenborough.
I work with drama in some of the most amazing, with the Doctor Who's and the Sherlocks and the Luthers. Again,
give me Albert Square and EastEnders all day long, but that's gone a little bit PC now.
Top Gear,
yeah,
one of the biggest brands in the world for car lovers. So again, I'm like the biggest fan of the BBC ever.
Yeah.
But I just think, and my job at the BBC was my dream job.
Yeah.
I think I left the UK because I couldn't find a better job than the one I had.
Yeah.
Like really,
Yeah.
like for a marketeer, working in the BBC, and that amount of creative output and
Yeah.
the quality of
Yeah.
it, and the professionalism of the people making it,
Yeah.
and the budget that they have to make
Yes.
stuff properly without
Without-
economic pressures
Yeah, it
and
was
relying on
it-
advertising. I really believe in the BBC.
I 100% believe in it, but this
Yeah.
thing with Hamas and calling them
It's not
terrorists is
acceptable.
not acceptable.
It's not acceptable. And for me, it's a deal breaker as well.
Complete deal breaker, and they deserve everything they get.
100%.
I hope they go down. And
that's quite bold. I don't know.
listen, they deserve something.
A massive slap.
Massive slap, a huge punish. Like they did.
No, I hope it's taken as the criminal case it should be.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Like
and
they have
people
broken the law.
And people are.
They will be. Heads will
punished.
roll. That's what, like,
Yeah.
the moment I saw the thing about the documentary, I was like, ugh. I had like the emoji of the face palm.
Yeah.
I was like, because like I say, it's such a damn hill to die on.
Yeah.
You're taking facts from a terrorist organization as legitimate information.
Yeah.
And you keep making corrections and apologies. Of course, at one point, it's gonna explode.
Yeah.
And if you didn't learn that lesson, the court is gonna make you learn it. And that's what's happening. So it's sad to witness.
Yeah.
It's dumb because it shouldn't have happened. And it's also like not rocket science. It's not a difficult one to get right. But they got it so wrong. I also think the interesting thing when I say outside of England that I worked for the BBC for many years is that outside of the UK, the reputation of the BBC is just news. People think it's just like a news outlet because globally the whole reputation is about news. But in England, it's everything.
It's everything.
It's children's, it's drama, it's documentary, it's EastEnders, it's the radio networks,
Yeah.
it's everything. It's music, it's the proms, it's everything.
Everything.
It's such an intrinsic part. Sport. It's
Wimbledon, BBC and Wimbledon.
Right. It's woven into British culture and life. It's woven from the radio to the website to the everything to cooking, like BBC recipes, BBC foods, and I am the biggest fan of everything they do, actually.
And
children's shows, they're incredible. CBBC, CBeebies, Teletubbies, like that, the new one, like it's like the BBC is incredible.
And big events like the Queen's funeral, you know, I would have only been watching the BBC.
Yeah, like
for
New Year's, like the New Year's thing, like like everything, and the proms. I've been to the proms. Like again, we're such fans of the BBC, and on this one, and again, it's not like I don't feel like, oh, you've let me down. I'm like, you're letting
yourselves down.
You're letting yourself down, and by doing that, every single license fee payer, because they're not getting the money's worth. They're not getting the information they deserve,
and complete lack of trust.
And you're breaking your trust. So it's just, that's why I say it's just sad and it's just dumb. The only word that comes to mind when I see this is
dumb.
It's dumb, because I'm not gonna say you're malicious, you're anti-Semitic, you're disgusting, you're anti-Israel, you're this. I'm not gonna protest outside the thing. I mean, you do you. You wanna keep trusting Hamas to broadcast this bullshit? You do you. Like you'll have to face court and destroy your reputation. Do it again. But that's the same that what happens with like Harvard and all these things that then all these presidents have to resign. That's what you want. Then just keep contextualizing terrorists. Keep giving context and romanticizing terrorists. See how that works for you. Again, there's nothing else I can do, and it's sad. It's heartbreaking because I also see the impact in terms of like direct, like anti-Semitism, anti-Israel sentiment that causes, and also how these things prolong the war here as well. It causes real violence and people die because of these reports. I really
hold the BBC responsible for fueling the rise in anti-Semitism in the UK. I really do.
Yeah.
All the media, but especially the BBC.
Yeah, because they contextualize it, then downplay things.
I mean, I've thrown things at the TV before. I've smashed glasses before watching them report. So, you know, I hope they
They get a slap.
They get a slap.
A big slap.
More of a slap.
Well, the only thing I hope for is that
Bit of pain.
my recommendation, my biased opinion and humble recommendation is not to treat this documentary as an isolated mistake,
No.
and to dig a little deeper, look into all the corrections and mistakes they've made over the past 16 months, and have an honest conversation and review about their own bias and their own literally the flaws in processes and decisions from the day they decided not to call Hamas a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
See how that worked for you over the past 16 months, which culminated in this terrible criminal case.
Yeah.
But it doesn't start and end with that.
No.
It started from the day they decided not to call terrorists that the king and the prime minister and the law in your country is calling terrorists, and you take a different avenue.
Yeah.
Everything from there is just downhill.
It's
and now
downhill.
we're just watching it play out, which is sad and tragic, but then again, it's just dumb.
Yeah. Right, on that note, so Daniel is off tomorrow for a couple of weeks, travelling.
Yep.
And
we'll be
but we will be
very
back,
soon.
and we might do a remote one. But
Maybe we'll
maybe
see. If
we'll
we can make the
see. We'll see if
technology
we
work.
can make it and times and all of that.
That's true.
But if not, we will be back again
Very soon.
soon. Take care.
Have a lovely day.